Hello and welcome to Setting the Stage, episode 29, Jack and Televyse. In order for the podcast to continue, we really need more guests to volunteer to be on the show. So if you're interested, or if you know someone who is interested, please go to gocorral.com/STS to learn more about how to apply to be on the show. That's GOCORRAL.com/STS. Today I'm here with Jack, who's going to tell us about his campaign. Hi, Jack.
Hey there.
Before we get into your campaign, do you want to tell us about yourself and who you are outside of RPGs and all that stuff?
All right, well, I'm Jack One Spade, real life name Nick Lucas. I'm a teacher, actually. I teach fourth grade elementary school, been doing that about 10 years.
That's cool. My wife's a fifth grade teacher.
Oh, nice. She gets to teach history of America.
Exactly. That's why she chose it. Yeah, she was. She really likes the U.S. history compared to the more generalized history for the other intermediate grades.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I teach. I wanted a profession that was, you get to know a bit about a whole lot of things. There's a little gif from Adventure Time of, I have approximate knowledge of many things.
Yes, the cat that knows.
Yeah, it's the cat from Adventure Time in the Thief City.
Yeah, that knows almost everything. So he knows that someone's hiding, but not where and that kind of stuff. Yes, I remember that.
I like that aspect of fourth grade.
And it's funny because that's exactly what my wife didn't like. But but yes, obviously, primary teachers are still very much learn. Or elementary, I guess, and primary. Learn everything.
Oh yeah, it's a lot of stuff to cover, and I found that a lot of my practices DMing and trying to keep tables on track and just keeping a focus moving forward has been weirdly helpful in ways I did not expect sometimes in teaching.
Oh man, you'd be surprised. Some groups will use candy as a motivator for stuff, and if instead of you get an M&M whenever you get inspiration for 5e or something like that. It's such a huge motivator for people. I play remotely now, so I don't get to do that as much. But
same here. I've been playing remotely for a long time. One of my regulars had to move to the Midwest, and I was like, "Well, we got to figure out how to make this work." Mm-hmm. And that was in 07, 08, before Roll20 was even a thing.
Oh yeah.
So we've been figuring out how to make online work for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My group, we started in elementary school, and we kept playing, and then we started going to college, and then it was around that time too, and then we didn't have a way to play with a battle mat and kind of stuff. So what I would do is I would get my webcam and just point it at the battle mat, and we'd kind of work with that as best we could.
That's cool. Yeah, we got lucky. We had a techie person who put up a quick, basic flat table called Game Table that you can put colored squares on, and then another company did a similar program a year later that was better. So we just used that.
Yeah, I remember there was some people that were playing with Excel sheets. They were emailing back and forth.
Yeah,
that was it's much better now. There's tons of different tools. They're all really good for that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, that's my main thing. Oh, I've also started doing freelancing for some RPGs. I've done some work with Silver Games LLC, which does Pony Finder, which, if you like My Little Pony and D&D...
okay, it's Pathfinder, but Pony.
It's exactly that.
Okay. Okay. I wouldn't think that would work best as a Pathfinder game, but all right.
It works better than you think it would. I still remember the day I first saw it, laughed. I was like, this is the dumbest thing. And then I read it. I was like, I need to play this immediately.
Oh, I was just thinking, the challenges that the ponies have aren't usually ones that involve the kind of, solutions that Pathfinder characters have. So I feel like you'd have to change, how you approach conflicts in general for that.
It's switched around. So it's a very D&D themed world, but there are ponies in it.
Oh, okay. All right. Then that totally works then.
It's a very interesting meshing of the two genres.
Okay. And I imagine there's other races besides the Earth ponies, Pegasus, and unicorns.
There's a surprising number of Pegasi and pony adjacent things that people are
Yeah.
fans of. But I've done some stuff with them and trying to work up the steam to get my own stuff published. But life.
Hmm. I actually used a decent number of My Little Pony music tracks in what for my like background music for my game as well. There's a composer that I like that posts a lot of stuff on YouTube called Macon6.
Mm-hmm.
And he did the soundtrack for the My Little Pony racing game, which has a bunch of really good soundtrack stuff.
Nice.
Oh, cool. How did you get started playing D&D?
I got started D&D in a complicated roundabout way because a lot of people are like, "Oh, my uncle showed it, my grandpa showed it, my dad."
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was illegal. I distinctly remember in 4th grade on a trip to Carson City, Nevada, I got this little lead figure of a wizard. And I was so happy with it. And I showed it to my mom and my stepdad. And like, that's fine. We'll let you get that. But don't play Dungeons and Dragons. And I was like, what's that? And like, it's some game in the 80s where kids killed each other in the sewers. And I was like, yeah, I definitely won't play that. And in my head, I was like, that sounds like the greatest game ever. And then years later, I had that in the back of my head. I would play Magic the Gathering. I got into other fantasy stuff. And for some reason, D&D never crossed my radar until I was in a used bookstore in the fantasy section looking for Magic the Gathering novels. And Encyclopedia Magica Volume 2 for AD&D 2nd edition had been misshelved. And I was like, oh, it's the game in the sewers.
Ooh.
And I read it and I was like, it's real. This is that young adult fantasy thing when you go on the adventure. And I like stuffed it in between all the other books I was getting and took it out to the counter. It was like, stay cool, stay cool. There's a cop outside. You don't want to get caught with this.
Oh no.
I was so sweaty and paid for that stuff like I was trying to sneak a porn magazine out. And then I poured over that book so much and then soon realized it was a game and laughed at myself for thinking it was illegal. And eventually went back to that store and they were like, oh, you're that kid that was acting all weird. And I was like, yeah. Do you have any more of this? And they're like, the dude like cracked his knuckles. It was like, come with me.
Yep.
For the 2nd edition Player's Handbook, Monsters Compendium, and Dungeon Master's Guide. And read those over and over and over. But didn't actually get a group going until 2001 with the release of D&D 3rd edition.
Uh-huh.
That came out. And like 2 weeks later, I had wrangled some friends together to go play it after school.
Yeah, 3rd edition is definitely easier to understand than 2nd.
Especially if you're coming in late 2nd, when you have all the books talking over each other.
Yeah, I guess that's true also.
Like, we had talked about starting to play, and there was some other kid at the school who played, and I was like, I want to be a halfling thief. And he's like, you don't want to be a halfling, you want to be a kender. And I don't know where that guy is, but I hate you, and I hate kenders.
Yeah, they are. If you play them as written, they're really annoying.
Exactly. But yeah, it was 2001. That came out. We started almost immediately, and I still play with some of the same people from back then.
Well, yeah, another typical question I ask is how did you start DMing? But I guess you started that way.
I started that way. We all started at the same time. I knew somebody had to do it, and I had read the most books.
Right.
So I was like, well, I've seen Knights of the Dinner Table and Dork Tower and Nodwick.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I was like, I'm the most qualified person for this job.
Yep. Classic comics from the Dungeon and Dragon magazines.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, I got started by the GM because I was the only person who took on the task.
You were talking about like the sewer panic, and that was a plot line in the Dinner Table too.
Yeah, the Satanic Panic.
On the sewer story. And not, I mean,
Yep.
the Satanic Panic features a little bit in KODT, but not as much as the sewer story.
Yeah.
Or I guess they have it be steam tunnels instead of the sewer, but
Yep. It's same general idea.
yeah.
Yeah. That's stuff like that is all the bits I heard about it growing up because my family knew I was into fantasy. So anytime something came up, they pointed to D&D like the boogeyman, not
Yeah.
knowing that it was only pushing me deeper into the realms of El Diablo.
Yes, that's a good short.
Yep. Another deep cut for the old ones out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh man. There's so many like little pieces of the internet that used to, like before we had YouTube, there was only like a few things that you got to watch.
You had to download it off of Napster. And the third file you got was probably it, because the other two were viruses.
Napster, LimeWire, Torrent. Well, Torrent's still around. LimeWire, I think, died, and Napster
Yeah.
is also dead. Man, I'm curious, like, what your first like adventure was like then, without having any sort of introduction to the game from anyone else.
Oh, my first adventure was complicated because we were all learning the rules. I was getting a lot of stuff wrong. I hadn't bought the starter adventure for 3rd edition because my mom would refuse to pay for yet another expensive book.
Mm-hmm.
So I did a book that I bought from 2nd edition called The Shattered Circle. So already in my first time out DMing, I'm reading a book for a different edition. I'm going like, okay, I think these things are tiny. They're spider people. I guess I could call them goblins.
You didn't want to use the adventure in the player's handbook?
Nope. I don't know why. It just didn't grip me.
Yeah, it's not a very good one. I can understand.
Yeah. Like, it didn't grip me so much that I forgot that it existed until you mentioned it. And I was like, oh, yeah, that was a thing.
I mean, it's just like a map and like a random encounter table. Like, it's not really a like adventure.
Yeah.
So I understand it.
But yeah. So I did. I already started out by reskinning and hacking a 2nd edition adventure to 3rd edition and trying to figure out how to make it work and going over referencing the maps back and forth. It was slow.
Mm-hmm.
And it was arduous, but there were moments where something clicked. Combat happened. People got to throw some spells around. So many goblins died in fires. And just, if you've ever watched middle schoolers and high schoolers play D&D and the sheer amount of war crimes and destruction that get unleashed in those,
yep,
100% that.
Yep. There's a lot more murder hoboing at that age level.
Oh, yeah. And you're also learning the things, so you're like, okay, your reference point is Final Fantasy, probably. So you're used to doing a lot of encounters in your RPGs. So my early games were a lot of that. A lot of getting to the dungeon, getting there to kill the things, and slowly started spiraling out and pulling in references to other things and going on different adventures. And now Vicious from Cowboy Bebop is there, and you're secretly the heir to the fire elemental gem that will save the multiverse. And here's a ship to go to the different universes.
Right. Gotta have all that. Yeah, I think I had the fire element gem in my first campaign as well. Well, what's your campaign now? Like, what are you doing now?
I have a lot of settings that are halfway complete that I've been working on. I have 2 groups right now. My main group on Saturday is using a setting called Plangea, which I didn't make. Atlas Games make it. It's a Stone Age fantasy game. Very cool. Highly recommend it.
Pangea. Okay, I get it now.
Plangea, and yeah, it's a nice little portmanteau. Very good setting. I can't recommend that enough. And then the other game that I'm setting up and starting now is called Televyse, which is a very high magic, high technology world compared to most other D&D settings that I've seen. It has a lot more of the roots of Shadowrun in it than most settings do.
All right, yeah, let's talk about Televised. Yeah, why don't we start with a physical description of the world?
Okay. So, physical layout of this world is in a weird place. In the history of this world, the plane was dying. Everything was coming undone, sort of unraveling Thanos snap style. And the gods of that age came together, whether they were good or evil or something else, were like, I don't like this. And they ended up sacrificing themselves to save parts of the world. So every god who sacrificed themselves was able to preserve this very large hexagonal chunk of land, a large hexagon of land. And all these hexagons are all fitted together like a puzzle with a hexagon in the middle, connected hexagons on each side, connected hexagons on each side. So there's a whole bunch of hexagons that make up what remains of the world. At the very center of all these hexagons are where all the people were left. And that's where they built their city, the city of Televyse. Wasn't called that originally. I haven't decided what it's called originally yet. So it's lost to the ages for now. But it grew into a massive metropolitan city, akin to New York, but on a scale closer to that of Texas. It is a large Texas, or the upper half of California.
I'm sorry, you're saying that the city is that large?
The city is that large.
Okay, so it's like the entire population of the world is crushed into this enormous
Yes.
metropolis.
Yes, the entire population of the city. Very few minor exceptions exist outside of that in the wilderness, but all the major races of the world are all confined into this one city. And it is grown up. It's very New York in feel, because that's the city that I can most reference from other media.
Uh-huh.
And it's all the other people, the elves, the dwarves, the elemental people, the fiendish people, the minotaurs, the bird people, are all finding their niches in this city and are consuming their media. They're getting paid. They're finding their jobs and making do as best they can there.
Okay. So I guess there's a lot of places to go off of that. So I had no idea the city was that big. That seems almost like it would collapse under its own weight. Like if you have to, like it seems like just like getting food and water would be irritating for the people that live in like the center of the city. Like how does water get there? And I guess food infrastructure is its own thing, but um, yeah. So how does the city support itself with that enormous scale?
A variety of companies have, quote, nobly stepped up to meet the various needs of the city, whether they're using spells to gate in water, or they're summoning fiends to butcher for meat, or they have large industries around the outer areas of the city that border the wilderness. There are times of the year where they just venture out and will strip mine and take everything they can from the land, the wood, the meat, the earth itself, and just cart that all back to the city in massive industrial engines to reprocess it for things into the city. And
Okay.
then to distribute it to the people, various trucking and shipping lines and monorails and buses.
Hmm.
Buses isn't the word, semi-trucks
Right.
are delivering the things to the various places they need to go.
Okay.
And then it has its aqueducts and sewer systems to transport water and spells from druids and things to create weather and rain and that sort of a thing.
So I guess a question I have then is like what keeps people in the city if they don't like it, I guess. Like I feel like there would be a lot of people that would want to leave a city that size.
A couple reasons. Extra planner travel is expensive. So leaving the plane is not something that most people can afford to do.
Well, it's not quite what I meant. I meant just like, okay, so there's the city center, but yeah, like there's other places on the hexagon, right? So,
Yes. Every month there's a great shifting of plates. And those hexagons that surround the city move. and they trade places and they change. And when they do that, the landscape shifts and changes. And attempts to set up long-term outposts have all failed.
Oh, okay. So there's basically an earthquake every month.
Yeah, every month there's a major cataclysm outside of the city. People in the city are like, well, sucks for whatever lives out there. Glad we're not out there.
Okay. That same like cataclysm also kind of like refreshes the natural resources. Is that the idea?
Yes, it does.
Okay. So all the like plants and animals that they've harvested from the previous month, those all sort of move around and are back where they were before. Well,
yep.
in a different hex place because the hexes all move.
Yes, each plate contains its own little biome, which corresponds to the alignments of the gods that created it, that saved it. So whether it's a good aligned god that had these large fields and hills, or a god of law who had a lot of rigid structures and like stone buildings and things they were for research, depending on what that god's portfolio and alignment was, whoever they were, saved a different part of the world. And so outside of the city, when the hexes change, new ones come in to take their place. And then they're trying to map out a pattern of what hex is going to be where and when and how they can be prepared for like
like
the mountains
astronomy.
are coming. Yeah.
Okay.
So they're like, the mountains are coming. That's going to be a real good time to harvest metal. And all the companies would be like advertising discounted metal prices and that sort of a thing.
Right. That's cool.
So yeah, it's outside. Stuff happens. They haven't set up an outpost that has lasted because every time this huge cataclysm happens and the world gets rearranged, nobody comes back.
I guess what I would try to do if I was like a enterprising person that was okay risking other people's lives, would be to try using a creature that could, tunnel into the earth, like an earth elemental. So like if the earth is getting rearranged, an earth elemental just like, shifts into the earth and survives and ends up, wherever they end up. That's what I would try to do.
Yeah, I'm going, well, that earth elemental just moved and hopefully survived the transport.
Yeah. Hopefully survived the transport, but then, you put on like some sort of tracking beacon or something. Yeah, I don't know what you do.
And then they could be like, they're over that way. You locate whatever equivalent of locate object is.
Yeah, and I think there's a spell that gives you that sort of movement, like Zorn travel or something like that. So you could do that to yourself if the earth elemental survives. You want to do animal testing before people.
Of course. And
elemental testing.
And there are likely some people in the city who have done this, but not on the scale that has enabled everybody to do this and set up an outpost that lasts.
Yeah, this is more like what you do to survive in Antarctica, not something that would work on a large scale.
For example, if an adventuring party wanted to go out into the wilderness and find something, there's probably a sort of a shelter they could buy or a trick of spells and abilities they could combine together to survive the cataclysm and then adventure out the next day and be like, well, I guess we keep going.
Right. So how big are the hexes for this?
I am bad at geography. So I don't have a length of miles, but I go with each plate is about the size of the plate that Televyse itself is on.
Okay. All right. That's close enough. There's a lot of different places I want to go here, but I guess the first question I have is the physical shape of Televyse itself. So obviously it's got hexagonal borders, but what I mean is more like, is it, how deep does it go underground? How deep is it above ground? What's the like? It almost feels like neighborhoods and boroughs is the wrong designation for a city of that size. Like, what are the suburbs and different sections? That kind of question.
It really breaks down into a lot of small divisions in the city. Things within things. I have various wards written in the document over like what the main quote neighborhoods are. But each neighborhood is also just like a tone for the style of building that is there, or for the certain neighborhood could feel like. So each one of these things, while there is a section of the city that's like the old city called the Sangruins,
Mhm.
it's not the only place in the city that's run down and sort of decrepit. There are places scattered through the city that reflect that, and people would also call them Sangruins.
Okay.
So miles apart each, roughly equal shares each. So let's see here. I have the Dome, the Annulum, the Ceruleum, the Sangruins, the Greens, the Tenebula, and the Arcantervinal. So that's 7 sections overall, with 6 sections with the Dome in the middle. So it is an area the size of Northern California split into roughly 6 even sections.
Okay.
As for how down and how upwards that goes, like some of the regions can be twice the height of New York,
Mhm.
and then going down to several like 10 to 20 stories below ground too.
Okay.
It's going to vary a lot by where you are in the city.
Gotcha. So still mostly like upwards. That's I guess fewer organizational sections than I was expecting for a city of that size.
Those are like the main. I had to break it down some way in terms of like, how can I talk about a city of this size without having to go into every individual neighborhood and every city block?
Yeah, these feel more like I guess at that size, like counties is almost like how big they are.
Yes, they're quite considerably large each, and each has their own little focus and thing that they are known for. Be that shopping and tech, or parks and greenlands. They each have their own little specialty.
Okay. And they're like I guess sort of like culture wise, like you kind of get a big grab bag of different things. Like there's the Chinatown section, and here's Little Italy, and there's the museum area, and this place has a bunch of parks, and that's kind of because of the size, you can have like that exists in this division, and that division. It's in all of them, right?
Exactly. So, like, if you want to talk about elven neighborhoods, it's not going to be, well, all the elves live in the green because that's where the grass is. It's like, well, the elves have their own culture, their own identity, and they're going to live in their own. Some of them will live in their own more insular places. I don't want to say the elves live here, but there will be some people that have like more elven populated areas, much like you find in major cities today.
Okay, so one of the other things you mentioned was like the technology level. So you mentioned like, semi trucks, trains. I guess you didn't mention like planes or helicopters or whatever, but it feels like it's pretty developed for ground transport compared to what we usually think of for D&D.
Yes, it is. It's right around the 80s and early 90s.
Okay.
Because that's the theme that I wanted to focus on. Because a lot of media from that time had this weird distorted view of capitalism where it was perversely celebrated. Movies like The Stuff or RoboCop, you could see how the businesses are run as these for-profit things, and it's parodying itself. And I was like, I really like that vibe. And I also didn't want to deal with how complicated the internet would be.
Right. Okay. So it's more like RoboCop or Terminator. I was thinking another like 80s New York thing is like The Warriors is the classic movie for that.
The Warriors would be a great adventure to happen in the Sangruins, in the rundown part of the city.
All right. Is there a Coney Island there that they can get to?
Totally.
Perfect.
It's totally going to be like, we got to get to Funland, guys.
Yeah. All right. So it's like magical technology, right? Not like a gasoline steam engine, whatever.
It's because of that, the pressure on resources. The main power source is magic. There is a network of magic that runs through the city, very akin to electricity, that is used to power all these devices that people can tap into and use.
Okay. And what generates that power, or it's magic and it's self-generating or something?
There is a thing kept secret in the heart of the city that the founders of the city closely guard, because keeping it imprisoned is essential to maintaining this network.
Oh, okay. It's kind of like the ones who walk away from Omelas.
I don't know that story.
Okay, it's the ones who walk away from Omelas is this story about a city that has a utopian, like perfect society where everyone in it gets whatever they want, and is always happy. But it's about the people who don't like it and leave. It's because the city is maintained through the pain and torture of one individual.
That does sound familiar.
So the idea is like, is a perfect society worth it if one person is horrifically punished for no reason, or should you try and like grade your society on more of a what the least member of it is valued at, is the like moral standpoint of the short story. And it's also sort of this like shameful thing that keeps the city running, and you were talking about like this secret for Televyse that they have to keep the crystal magic working. So
yeah,
reminded me of that.
Yeah, that I could see the parallels there. So keeping this thing contained has allowed them to tap into it for power. They basically turned this thing into a large battery. There are some people who are trying to see, like, well, what is the source of the magic of the city? And they've talked about feeling a shadow of there being something that they think is feeding off of people. And those people who raise a lot of loud questions tend to not be heard from.
Ooh. Is this something that you're sort of obliquely referencing to so your players can't figure out from listening in, or can you tell us?
This is super deep lore. There are 5 dragon lords that oversee the city. Each one of them embodies a different elemental force, a different emotion, and a different alignment.
Okay.
And they've been called the founders because they were the ones that helped found the city and gave magic to people. In the oldest records, there's still a monument in the center of, not the center of the city, in the government district, where a monument to the founders and the founding of the city, and there's 6 dragons there.
Oh.
And not many people know about the 6th dragon, because who's going to go out of their way for the boring history tour?
Okay.
But the thing that powers the city is the 6th dragon, one of the siblings of the Dragon Lords.
Okay. So the Dragon Lords are actual dragons, right?
They are actual dragons. I tied them to colors, but that's not like, well, they're the red dragon, so they're always evil. But I wanted to color coordinate them because I like it, and Tiamat's a very cool visual, even if I don't like what they represent in the game.
Right. So you said 5 elements, so is this the standard 5 colors for the chromatic dragons?
Let me go see here. I got the page open right here when he started to ask about the crystal.
Okay.
So there is Lutra, dragon of light and goodness, the scion of hard work, self-sacrifice, and generosity. Dyados, the dragon of evil, pride, greed, ambition, glory, and shadow. So they're white and black, or light and dark.
Okay.
Triune, the dragon of law, order, science, understanding, intellect, and elemental water. Blue dragon. Quars, the dragon of chaos, powerful emotions, artistry, passions, and destruction, and fire.
Okay.
And then the last one is Pantasia, the dragon of neutrality, patience, balance, empathy, and green of wood and growth and life.
Okay. So you got a little counting scheme here.
Yep. And then the last one was Nihil. And for nil, null, 0. Let's see here. One part that mentions a bit. Books that speak of another dragon speak of the name of Nihil. It is unknown what they were a dragon of or what they fight for. But they were slain sometime in the distant past, and their existence has been attempted to be erased from record.
Okay.
So the capture of that dragon sister is she's the battery that's fueling the rest of the city now, and gives that network a hunger, a desire to consume more and more.
Okay.
And that hunger is what drives capitalism of the city to force people to always demand more.
Is she captured or like voluntarily went into this situation to keep the city working the way it needs to work?
I haven't broached that topic off the top of my head. I don't think she stayed there willingly.
Mm.
I think there's a possibility she wanted to help at first and then was like, great, so are we done? Can I? And the answer was no.
Or can we trade?
Yeah, can we trade?
Yeah. So the 5 elements you picked were light, dark, fire, water, and wood. So it seems like you have a duality focus for the first 2, but then wood, I guess, is missing its partner because that would have been Nile.
Because Nile is nothingness and the end of all things.
Right.
Whereas Pentassia is about keeping things in balance. If you can't keep things in balance if there's nothing there.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I can see a connection there. So I guess another thing I was going to think of was like more of a triple relationship, like water puts out fire, fire burns wood, and wood can dam up water. Was my other thought.
I like that. I like when world building fits together in ways you didn't predict originally.
Well, I've been doing a lot of reading lately about the Chinese 5 elemental system, and it has more like interesting connections like that for the elements compared to the 4 elemental system, which is mostly just 2 opposites.
The original inspirations for the 5 dragons thing comes from Magic the Gathering with their 5 colors.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see it.
And because I didn't like how evil got a bad rap. It's so many things. It's like, if you're going to be the chaotic evil character that wants to kill everything, I'm like, why make evil an option if it's the only option that makes the game bad? So, in my setting, evil is tied to pride and ambition, which isn't an inherently bad thing. It's just labeled evil.
Yeah, that's like, Harry Potter with the Slytherin house.
I love Slytherin house.
Yeah.
So I really wanted to balance out the 5 aspects of alignment that D&D has, and mapping them onto the Magic the Gathering colors worked out so far very well.
Okay. Yeah, so you have good, evil, chaos, law, chaos, and then neutrality was the 5th one you were talking about for that alignment, right? Okay. So how did the 5, or I guess the 6, sort of found the city? Did they survive like the sort of rending of the plains that formed the hexagons, or how did they get there?
If you ask them, they saved everybody. There are a lot of people know that's not true, but they won't say that to their face. They were already powerful beings when this happened. As the world was being destroyed, their power grew more and more. They are feeding off of it.
Like the destruction of the world is something that like made them more powerful?
Because they embodied all these aspects of the world. As things of the world were destroyed, it returned to them.
Oh, I see. Okay. So there's like a sort of earth spirit power that's being drained from the rest of the world and going into them.
Yeah, it's a matter of they make up these components, so as there's less of it in the universe, there's more of it for them. Okay. Sort of like the dark side of the Force, how if there's more dark side users, the Force gets weaker spread among them. As there's less reality, they got strong enough to basically like suppress the powers of gods that enter into the realm now. Okay. And they're keeping this place in a sort of stasis. They're the ones that want things to stay the way that it is right now.
Okay, that was another question I had, because you mentioned like the gods sort of killing themselves to create the hexagons.
Mm-hmm.
Is like, what is the status of like gods in your campaign now? Because you like the dragons seem like they're sort of filling that role for Televyse, being these like all powerful. Well, gods aren't ever all powerful in D&D, but you know what I meant.
Exactly. They fill that super powerful sky being role. They are definitely one of those things that fill the role of gods. So there are advocates of Diados who are very like Wolf of Wall Street, greed is good,
Mm.
or hard workers who are like, I believe in the light of Lutra and doing what's right. So they've filled that role of religion for a lot of people. There are a lot of other. I'm trying to think of the right word. The word that people want to use is cult.
Mm-hmm.
New religions. There are smaller religions through the world that are more about spirituality and understanding and different things. And they are
Okay.
currently categorized as brands. They're a wellness brand that deals with keeping yourself and your sanity in check, or your spiritual connection to those around you.
Mm-hmm. So a wellness brand, like I don't know, like Nature Made or something like that makes vitamins, or what are we talking about here?
Let me scroll down to my section on wellness brands. So, example wellness brands that I have are things like Green Spaces is a fitness and martial arts group that works on landscaping, personal protection, and natural exploration throughout the green of the city. So they're very much like the Tai Chi and the park people
Okay.
that are like practicing meditation and slow martial arts. Uh, there are other groups dedicated to pharmaceuticals and basically treating different prescriptions as a form of religion, medicate to fix the problems in your life. So there are various small churches spread through the city that fill the role of religion in other settings.
Okay, so these are like community organizations, and you could potentially be a member of more than one.
Exactly.
Okay, and you're calling them brands. So like I'm part of Green Spaces and pharmaceutical
Yeah.
Bubba.
You could be
What?
part of greater restoratives and a part of green spaces.
Okay.
I wanted a coverall thing because a big part of the setting is the businesses, the corporations that are running the day-to-day of the city, that do
Okay.
the advertise and support the heroes of the world and want to get their branding out there. And looking at that and comparing it to like evangelical Christianism. I don't know if
Okay.
Christianism is a word, but comparing it to evangelical Christianity and how it's so grand and and capitalistic and advertising, it feels very in keeping with the world and with the role that religion plays in people. I think religion plays a role in your life to give you a sense of purpose and a sense
Hmm.
of being and a sense of connection to the people around you.
Okay.
And I think that religion fulfills that, but I also think being part of other communities fulfills that. Being a nerd fulfills that,
Right.
or you see people with like the it's the brand that middle schoolers and high schoolers want, and it's stupid looking. Supreme.
Oh, yep. There's lots of.
That branding also fills a sense of community, a
Mhm.
sense of we are together and we are the same.
Yeah, they're all owned by the same company, Cherokee.
Yeah. So again, feeds back into that loop of capitalism.
Yeah, Quicksilver, Fox, Obey, Supreme, what's some other ones? Billabong. Those are all owned by Cherokee.
Mm-hmm.
It's a funny company. They just come up with like weird little brands like that
Yeah.
somehow work and everyone buys them.
Yep. And so that when I look at religion, I'm not looking at it from a place of this is the place that has the answers of the universe. I'm coming from it from the perspective of what role is this playing in somebody's life?
Yeah, the usual finding a place to belong.
Yeah.
Mhm. Churches are much more community centers than they are anything else.
Yeah, very much so. I think church in a lot of games, church gets a bad rap because people want to complain about the thing that they were around so much of their life. But I think it also fills an important role on the society building level.
Well, I think part of that for D&D is that usually you're trying to highlight conflicts, right? Like you
Yep.
want your players to have something interesting to interact with, and just going to church isn't necessarily very interesting.
Yep.
Um, and obviously you will have religious characters that like paladins and clerics that will do that, but it becomes more a part of what their character is instead of what the world is around them, I think.
Yeah. It in some settings treat it as like the only people who really worship are the clerics and paladins, and
Mhm.
then leave out the day-to-day, the everyday prayers and rituals that people do.
Yes. That was something that I've done in my campaigns where it was just like, oh, okay, like everyone is doing all these little rituals, but we're not going to role play them just because doing it over and over again at the start of each day is boring.
There's only so many times I can say they do the thing. Like you
Hmm.
might highlight it when they first get to a city, but you don't need to do it every day.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's like we know everyone in this like pre-industrial society that my campaign is religious. They have to be, or else like there's something very wrong with them because how
Mm-hmm.
that society is structured. Um, but because it's everyone's like that, it becomes just a background.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it just becomes part of life. It's a thing that you don't question.
Hmm. Right. So in your survey, you mentioned like brand competition, and I was imagining like brands more like a large corporate like Coca-Cola and Pepsi having some sort of they're trying to sabotage the Pepsi plant is trying to sabotage the Coca-Cola plant or something like that.
They absolutely are doing that too. There is there has absolutely been a soda war in the city at some point. The winner
Oh,
of which was Crystal Cola.
okay.
Uh, and there are smaller upstarts trying to lead a united revolution called the Rainbow Coalition,
Hmm.
for the cherries and oranges of the city to unite together.
And the Hanson soda has got to make a break in there.
Yeah.
All right, so like it's this giant Uber city, and you in your survey you mentioned like cyberpunk kind of inspired, and the New York feel also like the Warriors is very much like a sort of punk movie.
Yeah. A lot of inspirations went into this. I mentioned RoboCop, The Running Man,
Hmm.
Demolition Man, and Dread.
Oh yeah, I was definitely thinking Dread before,
Yeah.
and Minority Report would be another one I think.
Yep. Minority Report. A lot of things that fit that large city state that a lot of people haven't realized is a problem.
Oh, wait, no, not Minority Report. What was it? I mean, I guess Minority Report also. I was thinking
It,
there's the one with Schwarzenegger was the original actor, and they did a
oh,
remake of it.
the Total Recall remake.
Yes, Total Recall. That was it. Thank you. But yeah, Minority Report also has that aesthetic,
Mm-hmm.
mixing them up.
It's just everything is teal and gray.
Uh-huh, right. I guess one question here is like, and this is true about a lot of things that are phrased this way. Would you view this more as like a sort of utopia or dystopia for this Uber city, or sort of neither?
That's a tricky question. For most people, it doesn't feel like either
Okay.
because they're not coming at it from that angle.
Mhm.
They're focusing on getting paid, paying their rent, paying their bills, watching their shows on television, catching their stories. Um,
Let me rephrase it then, because
yeah.
I feel like a lot of utopias and dystopias are like for the like pretend people that are living inside of them do view them that way. Like it's just like that's the way
Mm-hmm.
society is, and that when we describe a society that way, we're referring to our own impression within our culture of that society.
Okay. In that case, I would call this dystopian.
Okay.
It is a functioning dystopia in the fact that needs are being met, people are being cared for, people are not being ground up Soylent Green style.
Hmm.
But when you look deeper under the surface into what keeps the city running and are they actually doing what's good for the most people, the answer eventually is no.
Okay. I guess part of that was the city is kept running by torturing someone, like in the ones that walk away from Omelas, and
Mm-hmm.
the other part is there another section of it, or is that primarily what you were thinking of?
Uh, It's a matter of the companies that are running the city and keeping people happy are doing it for their own benefit.
Okay.
So they are doing this not because it's the right thing to do, but because it helps them to do things that are good for others. So I'll go grab one of my brands that I use as an example. Nana's Neo Meat is the largest provider of meat and meat substitutes through the city.
Okay.
They are considered a very good company because they offer cheap prices to people and they give them the flavor and the snack foods that they want. They do this by taking a little portion of souls from people in the form of currency and sacrifice,
Okay.
and barter that to devils. And those devils bring them other fiends from the plains that they can slaughter for meat.
Okay.
So all the prisoners from the Blood War end up getting shuffled over to Nana's Neo Meats to be fed to people through the city. And it's like, well, that's really fucked up. It's like, yeah, it is. But also, it's helping all these people. And because it's helping all these people, Nana gets to do this on a larger scale. And she gets to look like a friendly old granny just trying to look out for her grandchildren all over the city.
So she's taking like little slices off of people's souls and then combining that into a subprime soul package that she's selling to devils to get demon flesh.
Yes.
Okay. Jesus. Okay. You know, I, I guess I can see that.
Yeah. Because it doesn't hurt anybody. They barely notice it's gone.
Yeah. Well, I just watched the Disney Wish movie because it just came out on Disney Plus. And people are giving up little pieces of their soul there, and it doesn't hurt them until they realize what's gone.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't realize what's gone until they do.
Until they look at it, and not many people are looking at it.
Yep.
One of the Nana's Neo Meats gets a lot of focus in my writing because one of my players played a warlock of Nana's Neo Meats. Their warlock contract was with the fiend of Nana's Neo Meats called the Hell Cow.
Okay.
And through his story and his growth as a character, learned more and more of the inner workings of Nana's Neo Meats, and found out that the Hell Cow, from which Fat Jack's snack sticks are sold, is made from the regenerating flesh of the previous mascot that they had. He had absorbed so much salt and grease and flavor and experience through his life that he became rich and flavorful and was the perfect Hell Cow to replace the previous one once he could no longer regenerate.
All right. Isn't it nice to be able to eat a little slice off your patron?
Yeah. Get a little share.
Well, one of the other questions I usually ask besides gods for a campaign is about like the different races you have within your campaign world.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like it's as diverse as you want it for players. Like if they want to play anything but a Kender, you'll let them.
Yes, anything but Kender. They all mysteriously disappeared.
Right. And the way they fit within your world is, like you said, for elves, they kind of have their own place, but then there's other elves that live outside of those communities. Just like, in New York, there's a Chinatown section, but it's not like Chinese people have to live there.
Exactly.
So I guess the broader question I have is, after the world got sort of saved and torn apart at the same time, how did all of these races arrive at Televyse?
For survival, they had to build their things sort of close together originally. Mm-hmm. The gods basically just dropped them here, like, we'll come back later, and then never came back because they sacrificed themselves. Mm-hmm. So they've all been busy doing their own little things. A few of the races were ones that people know were there at the start.
Okay.
Elves were there at the start. Dwarves were there at the start. Halflings were there at the start. Mm-hmm. Goblins were there at the start. and dragonborn were there at the start.
Okay.
Elves, dragons, goblins, dwarves, is it halflings, I think? Yes.
One for each of the dragons.
Yep. Those were the 5 races that were there at the start and are considered the favored of their dragons. Halflings were the favorite of the dragon of good. Dragonborn were the favorite of the dragon of evil.
Okay.
Dwarves, the dragon of law. Goblins, the dragon of chaos. And elves, the dragon of neutrality.
Okay.
Humans arrived sometime later. They're not sure where humans came from, but they sure did populate quickly, and the dragons hate them.
All right. Faster than goblins.
Faster than people expected. They are used to tourists from other places. They did not expect all these humans to start showing up, and everyone's like, the humans don't even know how they got here. They're like, I don't know where they came up from down the street. What do you mean before that? My grandpa, I guess. So there were 5 races that were here at the start. Other races arrived later through different gates and portals and finding their own places to immigrate to within the city.
Okay. How does the city's like administration work? Is there like do the Dragon Lords have some sort of hierarchy that extends down from those 5 to the 7 divisions, or yeah, what's that structure like?
So the dragons are usually concerned with their own business. They're concerned with the city is working in the fact that it hasn't fallen apart. They aren't meddling in the day-to-day of the city. The dragons are concerned with the Dome, which is a massive entertainment complex in the center of the city.
Oh, okay.
They are concerned with the games because the games bring people here, and the games get people to watch the screens and feed off the magic of this and feed those the spell networks and that sort of a thing.
Okay.
The dragons want to keep the entertainment going. They are also the ones replenishing some of the destroyed territory. So as things get consumed, because these dragons are so elemental, they're the ones who are helping to recycle things and to replenish those damaged plates that people take everything from. There is a very complicated bureaucracy which oversees the rest of the city, and it is intentionally complicated to the point of not being some. It's there to be a plot device. A lot of this stuff is built story forward, not to be like, this is how you create a stable city. This is how you create plot hooks where things are complicated and you need to have some corrupt city officials.
Okay. So the bureaucracy is almost like its own entity with that kind of setup.
Mm-hmm. The Arcantervinal is a district of the city that houses most of the government buildings. I could read this straight from the document.
Uh-huh.
The city council is the leading ruler of the city. It operates out of a city block called the Councilor's Consulate, which contains the consulate chambers, the various offices that each of the city councilors require. They are immense structure. The city council is made up of 7 representatives chosen from each of the 7 departments, totaling 49 representatives. The council also selects one of their members to carry forth the final laws and decisions that require any Grand Dragon approval. So 50 members all total. The 6 departments of government are entertainment, science, labor, habitation, parks and reclamation, commerce, and oversight. So parks and reclamation, commerce, and oversight are like combined names.
Okay, right.
So they get officials from those, the various city departments that are spread throughout the minor government, the local government that would be operating through the city to form the Grand City Council, which is itself 50 representatives.
And is there like an executive branch within that? It sounds like that you have the legislative sort of covered with that.
The executive branch would be the dragons who have the final say-so over anything that they choose to.
Okay, gotcha. So you mentioned the document that you have, and I took a look at the Google Doc that you linked, and it's massive. This is almost like a full-on campaign setting.
It is 158 pages with
right.
more that I need to add to it.
I thought it was 152 when you first sent it to me.
I have since added more.
You've been writing, yes. Uh-huh. That's great. Is this something you're thinking about like restructuring into a published setting?
That's the dream. That's the
Uh-huh.
dream goal, is to get this together enough to publish it. So yeah, that's the goal.
Yeah, right now it's a very good Google Doc, but yeah, that's not quite the same formatting for publishing.
Exactly. It would need to be broken up into more defined sections and more front screen, back screen type materials. It's organized for a homebrew. It's not organized for publication yet.
I mean, the links are great.
I would go crazy if I didn't have that sidebar.
Yeah, that's it's it's very useful. Yeah, I started doing that for my own stuff too once I figured out that it was something. So I sort of regret that I wasn't doing it earlier.
Yeah, the heading options really are a game changer. Hey,
Yeah.
DMs out there, if you're using this, up near the fonts, about 2 buttons left on Google Docs from the font size is headings. If you create headings in your document, it will automatically create a table of contents on the left side that will hyperlink to parts of your document.
Yeah. Where it says
That,
normal text, change that to heading,
yep,
and then you can have subheadings, and it's wonderful.
yep. The heading 2 will be underneath heading 1 and heading 3 under heading 2. It is great. It was a game changer.
So the dome, so that's like this giant arena thing, Coliseum kind of thing. And they put on like gladiatorial games there. Is that the idea?
They do. A lot of the city is structured around supporting the dome. The dome is this huge, like miles long, miles wide, hexagonal arena in the center of the city. It's called the
Gotta have a
dome
hexagon.
it's called the dome because somebody called it that and it stuck, but it's a hexagon.
Okay.
And the dome has a lot of theaters and amphitheaters and pavilions and all these places to come see the live entertainment. It is what draws other tourists to the plane. It's what draws new blood into the city. It's like the heart of the city is all funneled towards supporting this huge mega structure of entertainment, of like sports and wrestling and martial combat all put together.
Okay. And you said there was like theater productions there as well, and like singing, dancing. It's all kinds of
It's
performance
all
art.
it's all kinds of performance art. The biggest draws are the professional dungeons, are the professional heroes.
Before we get into that, I had a question about another city infrastructure question. You mentioned trains. Is there like a subway within this giant jumbo city?
Yes, there is a sub. There is this dystopian city has a very robust public transportation system for people to use.
Excellent. Well, I mean that actually is like a key feature of a lot of different like the different dystopias that you mentioned
Mm-hmm.
as inspiration, where they actually do all seem to have like pretty good train systems.
Because some dictator said he keeps the trains running on time, which was a
Uh-huh.
lie, but it was popular.
Yes.
So yeah, the majority of the city has a very well-funded and robust transportation system. The only section of the city that does not have a well-supported public transport is the rich area of town called the Nebula,
Oh,
because they all have private drivers to get them places.
gotcha. The dome is in like the center of the city. You mentioned that before. But because of the size of the city, like if you're living on the edge, you'd be like, I don't know, 100 miles from the center.
Yep.
So a train could take, I don't know, 4 hours to go that amount of distance
Yep.
because it's got to make stops on the way. Um, so that sounds about right. So you could catch a train, go into an event, and go back that night. It would just like, you'd be on the train for a whole lot of time.
Yeah. Basically, yeah. I live in the California Bay Area.
Mhm.
It's kind of like taking a trip to the snow. It's a whole day trip to get up to the mountains. You probably rent a hotel for the night. You spend a day when you're in entertainment, and then you drive back home.
Yep. Yeah, it's a 3-4 hour drive up here. Yep. I live in Davis, so I'm a bit closer.
Yeah. it's insane to people from Europe to hear a lot of this stuff, how we talk about our geography. It's like, it's a day trip, 4 hours drive.
You're okay being in the car a lot.
Yeah. So yeah, it's getting through the city, especially those long distances across the various districts. It's doable. It takes a while, but it's doable.
Okay. All right. You were going to mention the adventure style gladiatorial stuff.
Yes. It's a lot of the most popular shows and entertainment spread throughout the city are professional heroes. Shows like Minion Wrestling or large like pay-per-view, they're gonna fight the Hydra type events.
Ooh.
And also there are production companies that will create scripted content where there's going to be a group of heroes going through the Tomb of Annihilation, and there are these little divination scrying crystals set up through the dungeon to film what they do as they go. So a lot of the things that adventurers might be doing in the game as players are going to be doing these professional dungeoneering events and trying to appeal to the crowd and collect fame for being a hero.
So like the city will set up like a gauntlet of traps or something, and a rogue has to disarm them and make their way through the gauntlet. Is that the idea?
Yes. The level of violence is going to vary depending on the event. It's not a whole bunch of people lining up to watch people get killed, but a lot of it is very much like professional wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be like, is Lone Wolf going to make it through another adventure? Let's see. And then Lone Wolf is dressed all in black with a black face mask and a black sword, going through an adventure as a Lone Wolf hero.
Okay, gotcha. I guess they had that in the D&D movie.
Yes,
like they had that maze thing.
The big maze that popped up. That was definitely something that I was thinking about for this.
Yeah, that was in the original D&D movie too, actually.
It was. The original D&D movie had a lot of very cool pieces in a very bad film.
Yes, it was.
Snails in the oatmeal rug trap was a good moment.
Oh man, that's a weird movie.
There's gonna be some people who are like, the oatmeal rug trap? The other people are gonna be like, oh yeah.
Man, I'm shocked that they made 2 sequels to that movie. It's like, what were you thinking? Did you watch the first one?
I'm not shocked. They went straight to DVD.
But they still made them.
Wizards has tried to make D&D movies for a long time.
Yeah,
they had a choose your own adventure DVD game that came out close to the release of 3rd edition that people forgot about.
I played that one. I did every single different adventure path on it, and there is a special hidden one that's a little bit better than the other endings. Man, and yeah, even the most recent movie still wasn't like technically successful.
Which is, I think, a big part of that was timing and how they advertised it.
Mm.
They tried to advertise it to the nerds, to us, but we already would have seen it if you hadn't been a jerk.
Yeah.
With the whole OGL scandal, if you had just been quiet, Wizards.
Yeah, that definitely damaged the brand a little bit for section of the fandom.
But if they had advertised it as just a fantasy movie for everybody and not as like a big nerd wink wink, I think it would have been a lot better received.
I'm not even sure like what really makes it a D&D movie as opposed to a fantasy movie. And I've talked about this before with other people, but like I feel like a D&D movie has to be something more like Mazes and Monsters or The Gamers or those stories where it focuses on a D&D group and kind of the fantasy story underlying that. And Mazes and Monsters is more of a horror story for that. But
I don't know if this is a different context, but I would debate this point with you. I think it's absolutely a D&D movie. there are a lot of moments in that movie that feel like it got taken from a table.
I think the
It's
Speak
just
with Dead one, definitely.
the Speak with Dead, the Fat Dragon, uh, the long description of the traps for the bridge, and then the whole thing collapsing, and then needing to figure out another solution.
Mm.
Whichever handsome Chris was on screen trying to talk his way past somebody felt very on par for being a rogue or a bard in D&D. You could see just the way they did the monsters and the abilities, and you could sort of see which one mapped onto the game. I really think it was a D&D movie, and you could see the little winks of it.
I guess what I'm saying is a lot of those things also fit within the adventure movie genre. Like Indiana Jones has very similar setups for its kind of stuff as well,
Mm-hmm.
or Star Wars. And like the Scorpion King had a lot of the same kind of stuff. I mean, it has a smaller like party dynamic of 3 people instead of 4/5.
Mm-hmm.
And the D&D setting itself isn't like this was a recognizable location for people who have played Neverwinter Nights, and the Red Wizards of Thay are a very classic villain for Forgotten Realms. But I don't feel that those are things that resonate outside of D&D to people that aren't fans of the Forgotten Realms at all.
Mm-hmm.
So even within the hobby, it doesn't necessarily have any connection points.
I could see that. But yeah, to me, it felt very much like a D&D campaign. It felt like that in a lot of ways.
I was even thinking that the druid character was one that was like not interested in role playing and just wanted to kill bad guys.
Exactly.
It was like,
that's the quiet.
She doesn't really say
table.
much. Yeah, she's a very passive character.
We all have that person at our table who doesn't want to get involved in interpersonal conflict. They just want to solve the problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a perfectly fine way to play the game. Okay, so in the Dome, they have these adventure shows where, they got adventures that are in like sort of a reality TV show thing where they have to, get the skull of Ragmar before time runs out.
Mm-hmm.
Will he get it after this commercial break? Oh, okay, guy, dude, take a break while we're on commercial.
Yep.
We got to fix your makeup, and you got to limp on your leg more. You got to really sell it. I guess another thing question I have for that is, do they do like reality TV shows have this like in the moment interview thing that they do?
Yeah, where it cuts away to them talking afterward.
Right, but they're sort of putting themselves into the like reimagining what it was like when they were experiencing those events. And it's unique to reality TV shows for that, because in other forms of media, like in D&D, you can, as a player, describe what your character is thinking without having a actual in the moment interview to describe it.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's just in your character's head, but then everyone knows at the table what's going through your character's head because you can describe it that way. Same
Mm-hmm.
thing for books and comics. You can get into characters' heads, but with reality TV shows, you can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess my question is, do you do in the moment interviews? Do you do them like actually in the moment for characters? Do you do them afterwards and kind of like try and play it that way, or is this something that you don't do because the medium that you're doing isn't actually a reality TV show? It's still like you can just describe what your character's thoughts are, and we don't need the sort of artificial way to do that.
What I would do is, if a player wanted to do that, I can always justify it. Be like, there's an illusionist on standby and a friend who knows Rary's telepathic bond. So the time dilation that lets them watch these 30 seconds of combat play out over half an hour, they can totally tap into your brain for a little bit, manifest you off stage, get your thoughts, and then let you go back into your body and just explain it through chronomancy.
Okay.
And that, because D&D rounds, 6 seconds. And that's a really short show for somebody to watch. So you can explain that by going like, oh, they're watching a time-dilated version, and it's doing replays and cutting in on the action.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like a lot of like actual action scenes in movies are usually more like 2 to 5 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
uh, or sometimes even 10 minutes. But the 10 minutes feels really long for an action scene.
Yeah.
Just thinking of They Live, I saw recently, where it's just got that random.
That really, really long fight in the middle.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it is. It is long. It is too long.
it
It's
feels like it's gonna end, and the other guy gets up like, ah!
Yeah, yeah, it's twice as long as it needed to be.
It was the one of the funniest things I've ever seen in a movie.
Yeah.
The fact that it goes on too long is so funny to me every time I see that movie.
Yep, yep. It's good action, but it's just like spread this out a bit more, like you give me one fight and then, have another scene in between for God's sake.
No, you
Uh,
get a still camera on the side.
anyways, where I was going with that is like 2 to 5 minutes is usually like a good length for an action like scene, but in D&D, a combat is usually over within 5 rounds.
Yeah. I would say that when those moments are happening and the audience is watching, there's some magic going on through the nature of the dome that allows them to zoom in and highlight those moments and stretch them out so that the audience can enjoy it from multiple angles and perspectives while the people in the dome are still reacting in real time and feeling it in the moment.
Gotcha. Okay. And it's set up like the WWE, right? Where like, the character, like their personas have like, faces and heels, and like they have
Mm-hmm.
relationships with each other, and then there's like betrayals, and like the villain captures the face's girlfriend, and then she does a heel turn and ends up being the
Yep.
villain's girlfriend, and that kind of stuff is all part of it.
Yep. Friday Night Fights would definitely be doing that.
All right. Cool. Um, so your actual campaign, is that within this framework? What are we doing here?
So the campaign, which I'm going to be starting to stream this on Twitch, it's called Televyse Season 1. It's going to be streaming on Jack One Spade's Twitch on Twitch. Um, the premise is that they're starting at level 1. All of the players, their characters, were doing grunt work around the set. They were either like a stunt man or professional minion who's just there to take a hit and then roll off screen, or they were with craft services, or they're a personal assistant, or they're a stage engineer who's
Hmm.
just supposed to like move the sets around.
Yeah, grip.
Um, yep, a grip. That's the word. And then they were on staff for the Crystal Cola Race for the Taste event, which is a
Ooh.
Crystal Cola sponsored event to show how great Crystal Cola is. And then 10 minutes before air, during an interview, somebody turned on a large industrial fan in the wrong direction, and one of the competing teams got pulled into it and chopped into tiny pieces. And their insurance doesn't cover their resurrection because they have to sort through all the pieces, and that wasn't part of their insurance premium. So they need to fill that role really quickly. And so they drafted these interns into the arena, and we're like, look, there's a clause in your contract that you signed that enables us to do this. The lingo in the world is they were voluntold.
Gotta read your contracts.
Exactly. So they are suddenly replacing one of the fan favorite teams as just the other guys. And so they're quickly given like a set of equipment and be like, okay, look, we're going to run you through it. Some of it you already know. Just do your best. You don't have to win. You're probably going to lose. Just don't die, because your contract only covers zombification for a period of 10 years. So you don't want that.
or or not even a raised dead. Oh boy.
Look, zombification means that you keep working until you save up enough money to pay for the raised dead.
Ah, I see.
You can't just give healthcare just because there's magic.
Man, does raised dead even work after 5 years?
That's something to take up with your contract negotiator.
Oh, jeez. Uh-oh. Yeah, it only works for 10 days. Okay, no, it does not work. Need to save up for a resurrection.
Look, don't tell the interns that, okay? They thought they
Uh,
won.
all right, all right.
But yeah, so the campaign starts off that they are going to be competing in this Crystal Cola tournament of champions. And they're just suddenly there and they have to do the adventure rooms while advertising Crystal Cola.
Okay, so I don't know, there's a lock that they have to unlock that they have to like lube up with Crystal Cola or something. Like you shake it up and throw it into the group of goblins and it explodes.
Basically, yeah. So I set up like a series of scenarios. So every room in the dungeon is like another commercial for Crystal Cola that they have to solve against another team. So like, let me see here. The first one is Raven's Rock. A Kenku band is rocking out. Players need to navigate the spotlight as they move through the map to gain points. They can also gain points by getting people jazzed for Kenku's Cola concert. They can use singing or dancing to draw attention to themselves and hype up the concert. Thieves' tools and arcana can be used to enhance the sound system. Failure means that you're jostled about by the dancing crowd, take some damage. If you pass a check after drinking a Crystal Cola, you are awarded double points because the advertisers really like that. So so they're going like, oh man, how am I going to get through this crowd? Opens up a can of Crystal Cola, pours it over themselves. We're rolling acrobatics to move through the crowd and try and draw the spotlight onto themselves.
Ah, perfect. I was thinking you gotta have them do like a Gatorade commercial for like the Crystal Cola healing potion.
Exactly. Another one is like, there's some no good nicks holed up at the watering hole in this Wild West themed town, and you've got to blow up the watering hole to share Crystal Cola with everybody. So each of these things is set up as like a parody of commercials and that sort of a thing to hype up Crystal Cola, but they're using their D&D skills. They're using their spells, their skills, and trying to complete each challenge before the other team.
All right, so it's a competition aspect to it.
Yep, there's another team. They're NPCs. They just get points at a certain time, but players can try to mess with them, or they can try and hinder the players. That sort of an aspect.
You mentioned that you just started this on the Discord channel. Where do you see the campaign going later on?
Other stuff later on. I have the original, the one shot, the Crystal Cola Race for the Taste event planned. After that, it's going to open up more for the players and the different aspects of the city they want to explore. Different seeking out sponsors, becoming an influencer and trying to get people to follow the party. Whether they want to explore outside and see if they could discover stuff about the world, or they want to do. One player said he wants to do corporate espionage. He wants to be like stealing things from corporations for other corporations. Another person wants to be like from the slums and wants to rebel against the city's machinations and try and free people from oppression. So there are other aspects to explore outside of the. And then this week we're doing another themed dungeon.
Okay, but you're having it be more like player guided for where it goes.
Yes.
Okay.
I have other aspects of like somebody wants to make a movie, so he's going to have the players go outside the city and try and find someplace really spooky so he can get a lot of very cool action spooky shots that he could edit into a horror movie later. So that's one of the adventure hooks.
Okay. Cool.
Another player said that he wanted to meet the giant hamsters that live out in the wilderness.
Of course.
So I'm going to have an adventure for meeting the giant hamsters. The giant hamsters being one of the few races that has managed to survive outside of the city.
They have tunneling powers.
They have tunneling powers that you called earlier.
That must be it.
They sleep during the calamity. They go underground and they sleep. And so they don't know the calamity's happening. They just wake up and everything's great again.
Oh, I was gonna say, like, hamsters are really easy to lose. So whenever you lose a hamster, what actually happens is that it just, like, goes through a fold in space, ends up out in the wilderness, and is 100 times the size.
I like that. That's where the lost hamster went.
Yeah, and they've got socks on all their feet too from the laundry.
I like that. Everybody who has ever had a hamster also has a traumatic story about that hamster.
Hmm. Yeah, almost stepping on it, getting under something, and you almost dropped a book on it or something like that.
Yep.
Or they just get sick really easily is another part.
Here's my hamster trauma. Did you know that hamsters hibernate when it's cold?
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it turns out hamsters hibernate when they're cold. They enter a state of death-like torpor.
Oh,
So a lot of those sick hamsters weren't sick. They were just hibernating because your parents probably didn't have the heat on through the winter.
hmm. Okay. I
And then we buried ours.
did not know that. Did it tunnel its way out?
No, no. We
Hamster coming back from the dead.
no. We thought the hamster died. We put it in a Ziploc bag and we buried it in the front lawn.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
I found out 7 years later that hamsters torpor, and it shook me to my core.
You'd think it would wake up when you put it in the bag.
It did not.
Okay. Well, I don't know. I feel like putting a hamster in a Ziploc bag. If it wasn't dead before it went in the bag, it probably wouldn't. It would probably be dead by the time you buried it.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, I'm sorry that happened to your hamster as a child.
I was 19 when that happened.
Okay.
I was 19. My brother was in like middle school. It was, yeah. It wasn't a 5-year-old thing. It was basically an adult, and mistakes were made.
Oh, you know better now.
Yep. So anytime hamsters come up, I try and shoehorn in that little fact in case anybody listening has a hamster, because I don't want that to happen to anybody else. That is what I am the Batman of, protecting that one specific facet of hamster care.
Yeah, gotcha. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about for Televyse before we wrap it up?
Nothing current. I have just stuff that I've put into the game.
Mhm.
I am working on a bunch of rules for it. I've got firearms rules in here to try and make guns more of an option that's not just a bow but better. I wanted to be something that was an alternative to a bow but still filled a lot of those themes of guns in other games.
Okay.
I'm trying to work out vehicle rules. I have a bunch of subclasses that my players are being kind enough to try and play test.
Okay, that's cool.
Themed around various city themes. There's like a Batman Paladin, a Spider-Man Ranger, a Chef Artificer. Just different modern spins on fantasy archetypes.
Okay. Does 5e have uncanny dodge? You got to give that to Spider-Man.
It does have uncanny dodge, but that's a rogue thing specifically.
Right.
And it doesn't work the way that it did in 5th edition either. I mean, that doesn't work the way that it worked in 3rd edition.
Well, it sucked in 3rd edition.
Hey, you didn't lose your dex bonus to AC.
Yeah. Use your reaction to have an attack's damage against you. That's not bad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's
I'm
pretty
just
good.
thinking that's a very Spider-Man ability, like the Spidey sense and dodging something at the last second.
Yeah. Let me go look at my Ranger. The Swinging Stalker. Has a bonus action to gain a fly speed till the end of your turn. You must land your turn on solid ground.
Mm-hmm.
Various enemy takedowns that were kind of like fighter maneuvers. When an enemy misses you with an attack, you may use a reaction to move half your speed. So that fits into that uncanny dodge sort of an aspect.
Okay, yeah, it does.
Level 15, their capstone. When you would take damage from an attack or spell, you may re-roll the damage you would take. you get to impose basically disadvantage on damage that you are taking.
All the time.
I'm not sure how often. Oh, once each round when you would take damage from an attacker spell.
Okay.
It's a capstone ability, so I wasn't like, I need to really tone this down. If it ends up being broken someday in play, then I can tone it down. But right now, it hasn't seen play yet. So
Okay. Is there a way to web up bad guys?
I don't have a way to web up bad guys because that was a little bit too on the nose for Spider-Man.
Uh-huh.
But I was thinking more of like a character that's bouncing around using the narrow alleys of the city, able to get up and down and around. It's a more mobile type than just I'm gonna sticky them. But Spider-Man was definitely one of the influences for it.
Yeah. Okay.
So hopefully someday this can get into a published format, and then more people can see Televyse.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Kobold Press, making
Uh-huh.
Tales of the Valiant.
Uh-huh.
Part of their Kickstarter campaign was they're putting like a multiverse book together, and a bunch of people could submit their world ideas to get a little mention in that book.
Uh-huh.
And my Televyse was one of the worlds that's going to get a mention in that someday when Tales of the Valiant gets released.
Oh, cool. What's Tales of the Valiant for them?
Tales of the Valiant is the Kobold Press OGL free 5e replacement.
Oh, okay. Global Press has some good stuff.
Yeah, they have a long history of making some good stuff. And I'm going to look at the playtests for Tales, and it looks like it looks like what Pathfinder did to 3.5. That's what
Yeah.
Kobold Press is doing to 5th edition.
Yeah, now that you say that, I definitely see that.
Yeah. Not completely building a new train, but putting a new coat of paint on it and trying to make the mechanics work a little bit different.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's cool. Man, I guess you mentioned guns. I mean, the main difference, like in the real world, between guns and bows is that guns are easy to learn how to use.
Mm-hmm.
So like everyone gets their proficiency bonus with them because they're so easy to use. I guess would be one way of representing that, but that feels almost sort of boring within D&D.
I split the guns along martial and simple.
Mm-hmm.
So a regular pistol was a simple weapon, but something like a revolver that you might have to clean and take apart and have to load the bullets in right, things that are more sophisticated are martial weapons.
Okay.
So a basic hunting rifle was simple, a combat shotgun was martial, a flamethrower is martial, a sniper rifle is martial.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Hunting rifle, sawed-off shotgun, those are both simple weapons.
Okay. How did you make them different than bow, but does slightly more damage?
So basically, I used the stats of bows and crossbows as a starting point and was able to just tweak around with those numbers a little bit. So I'll go to the pistol as an example. It does 1d6 piercing damage, 6 shots before you have to reload, but it's an action to reload. So a bow, you could fire it every round. Pistol, you eventually have to reload as an action. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that is based on how they reload or how many shots they can take. Shotguns and a couple other guns also have burst fire. So instead of attacking a single target, you're attacking an area. And then the people in that area have to make a dexterity saving.
Yep. There were some supplemental rules for that, I think, in the DMG for like a bunch of people attacking with a bunch of bows.
Yeah, so it's that sort of a thing.
Okay.
A couple of things, like I also put in, one thing that I hated was there's some archetypes for guns that aren't really dexterous marksmen. And one of them is always the big fat guy with the big gun. Mm-hmm. So I put in a property called Kickback, which lets you use your Constitution modifier for attack rolls and damage rolls with it.
Oh, okay.
So for those guys that like have the shoulder-mounted minigun or just have like a shotgun that they hip fire at somebody, they could use their con score as they have to brace it with their belly, or they're not their belly, but that's the reference I keep going to Roadhog from Overwatch.
Right. Yeah.
So there's the more up close, I'm not really aiming, but shooting at a general area type guns could have the kickback property.
Right. I was thinking of the finesse property, which feels weird when you put it on a ranged weapon, but it actually means that you can use your strength with it. But yeah, Constitution works just as well. Constitution doesn't get enough love in D&D.
It gets love because it keeps you alive, but you don't get to do anything with it. It's the one stat that doesn't have a skill.
Yeah, it's well, it used to have concentration.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it does almost nothing in 5th edition.
Yeah.
I guess kind of in 3rd edition too.
The people who are good at it are the people who use it the least. Fighters and barbarians would get it because they need their hit points. Wizards need it for concentration, but usually don't have it.
Right. Yeah, I feel like 4th edition made it actually matter.
The good things that 4th edition did.
Uh-huh. And I guess you also mentioned vehicles for the. Is there anything about the vehicles that you wanted to share?
Vehicles are something I'm thinking about if I need to redo it. But the short of it is, instead of giving them the same ability scores that everybody else has, because when Wizards did their stats for vehicles, they gave them strength, dex, int, whiz, caw. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense for a car. So I gave them stats called fast and tough, and then a turn DC. So the sharper you try and turn something big, the higher the turn DC is. Okay. So it's more about how far can you turn than what your personal score. So they have a number of hits they could take. Looking at the table right now. A standard medium car carries 2 people, has 5 hits, has an AC of 15. Any damage over 8 damages the car. If it goes 2 times 8, it damages the car twice. Once all 5 hits are used up, the car isn't going to work anymore. And then the bigger the car, the more hits it can take. So it's not quite tracking a bunch of hit points like it is for a player character. It's a more abstracted thing. And then I have rules for crashing and explosions because every action movie needs crashes.
Of course. Gotta have your big explosions.
Yep. And then all the add-ons you can get for it, whether you're putting in bumper spikes or tire shredders, or you're having a dashboard where you can attach magical playing cards to it to cast spells on the car.
Wow, this is a lot.
Yep. I have a lot of things in there that haven't been used too much. My first party played around with it a little bit, and it worked pretty good in play. If it's something you're using regularly, I think it would work very well. But it's also its own sort of thing that you could just choose to ignore.
So, I'm sorry, did you mention that there was like power-up cards for the cars, like Digimon?
Yes. One of the things that I did with the world, it was a minor thing that ended up coming into play in a neat way in my game. Anybody could use scrolls. I don't care if you're a fighter or a barbarian or a wizard. You can pick up a scroll. It's a playing card like a Magic the Gathering card, and you can play that card down on the ground and say what the card says and cast that spell. So they go up to like 3rd level for scrolls. Anybody can buy and use scrolls. And it's added in some neat options for fighters in my game where they keep a pocket with like a shield spell in it. They could whip out just in case they got hit in the clutch moment.
Cool.
It was a minor change that led to some neat moments in play. And so I'm gonna keep doing that and keep figuring out how much those should cost and what kind of spells make good cards and that sort of a thing.
All right, yeah, no, that's a good little alteration. I mean, potions are kind of like the usual thing for like anybody can use those compared to scrolls, but typically potions are only used on yourself.
Yep. I always just like the aspect of somebody pulling out a card, yelling what's on it, and then slapping it down like Yu-Gi-Oh! And having the spell actually go off.
Lightning bolt!
I just really like that visual of yes. of going lightning bolt, conjures the 10-foot line, and then a 60-foot line lightning, and then the lightning bolt arcs out of the card.
I mean, it's kind of what like Magic the Gathering is supposed to be.
Yeah. In the very old book, that is exactly what Magic the Gathering was. Magic the Gathering Arena, the very first published Magic the Gathering novel, the wizards carried around like a bag of dirt that connected them to the land and their mana that they could use spells to play against each other in an arena. It was wild, and Magic has gone so far away from that since then.
Yes, it's
Yeah. I like a lot of the aspects of Magic. I haven't played it for a long time for various reasons. Number one being the cost.
yeah, it is a expensive hobby.
Steering this back on topic, I don't have any other specific things about my setting. It's really made game first as opposed to world first.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's definitely a way to handle stuff. Well, what I usually do for wrapping up the episode is asking you if you have any like DM advice that you want to share with someone else that would be listening.
My DM advice. 2 pieces that I see complained about a lot. I see people complaining about power gamers. I see a lot of complaints. How do I stop this player from ruining my game? My usual thing is that you need a more diverse number of challenges. If combat is the only puzzle in your game to solve, players will optimize to solve that as best they can. When you are in a game, you play that to be the best that you can, in every small way that you can. I always think back to Ocarina of Time. Doing the forward roll got you just a little bit faster to where you were going. So everybody who I know who played that game, if you had to get from the forest to the castle, you forward rolled all the way across that field until you got the horse. Because it was just a little bit faster. So in a D&D game, if somebody wants to play your game, they want to be as good as they can at playing the game. So they are going to optimize for combat if that is what your game is challenging them on. So to answer the challenge of the power gamer, you need climbs, you need obstacles, you need objectives that are not kill all the people. You need somebody being slowly lowered over a pit of snakes, that if they don't save that person going to the pit of snakes, things go badly. You failed the mission, you failed the job, you didn't get to save that person. So you need things that aren't just solved by killing everybody around you. So I think that's one of the better ways to deal with a power gamer, to give them things that aren't solved with that option.
Yeah, that's good advice.
And then that lets the other people who didn't power game shine in other ways. The other thing that I see complained about is people complaining about how weird all the races are. People going like, well, if I've got a Harengon, a Tiefling, a Genasi, but they're showing up in a town of humans, why isn't that weird? And I'm like, well, your world is kind of boring then. The world should be as diverse as the character options are. If your world is limited to the core races, like the 8 races that are all mostly human with different colors and different sizes, then those people should be more spread through your world. Our own world with only humans is more diverse than most people's game worlds are. They're the elves live here, the humans are here, the gnomes are here, and everyone is in their own little slice of the pie. But that's not how the world is. And I think people forget that when it becomes fantasy. So I think that if you have a bunch of diverse options for players to pick, recognize that they are going to pick those and make those characters present in the world. Whether it's an Aarakocra or a hippo or a centaur, they should exist somewhere in your world and have a place to integrate with all the other races.
Yeah, definitely.
Even if it's a small way, the player is not the only person of that race. And so your world, if these races exist as options, your world needs to be diverse to have them exist as people and not just as player characters. So that's my two of my. The last one, robots aren't warforged. If you say a robot is programmed, you're wrong, and I hate you. And that's my 3DM thing.
Okay. Well, two good ones and an opinion. All right.
Yes, two good ones and an opinion and a hill that I will die on.
All right. Well, thanks, Jack. It was great having you on the show.
All right, thanks. Glad to being on the show.
Quick reminder that I'm looking for people to go on the show, so if you or someone you know would be interested, please direct yourself or them to gocorral.com/SDS. That's GOCORRAL.com/SDS.
I like a lot of the aspects of Magic. I haven't played it for a long time for various reasons. Number one being the cost.
Yeah, it is an expensive hobby.
I do like the theming that they put into their sets. I like their themes, and I like their art.
Well, Cowboys are coming out soon. They're finally doing one.
That is definitely a thing that exists, and I don't know how I feel about that. I was like, oh, you put my Deadlands in that game I used to play.
I mean, Cowboys was like one of the most requested things for a while. We got ninjas, we got Vikings, we got dinosaurs. You know, we got to get the other one of our little toys from back in the day into the cards.
You need all the genres.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think Wizards of the Coast, just from other aspects of diversity they've handled, I'm waiting for what dumpster fire of cultural sensitivity Wizards is going to pick up with this. I'm sure it's going to happen.
There wasn't something bad with Kamigawa for the return there. I don't remember anything bad from the original Kamigawa block either.
I don't know about Kamigawa, but I know that when Wizards made yet another slave race in not Planescape, Spelljammer, it was a bunch of eye rolling and just like, you gotta come up with something else. You can't keep doing this.
Yep. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. And given how contentious the Western genre is in general, for valid real life reasons, I predict there's going to be a thing. I predict there's going to be a problem, and it's going to be Wizards' fault.
I don't think they did the Cowboys versus Indians part of it for the setting. Like, I didn't see any cards that were really playing into that idea of Cowboys. It was more like, you know, riding horses and like gun duels kind of stuff was that they were trying to do with the aesthetic. And desert stuff also, because everything has to take place in Nevada.
Yeah. Everything happens in Nevada and Arizona.
There's this little town in the middle of nowhere, and me and my dad, when we're watching Westerns, always like, why is there a town here? There's nothing here. How do they have water? There's no farms around it. Why is there a town here? Who is this town supporting?
Yeah, just why? Why? You don't even have a river.
Right. Like, and some movies do it right. Like, you know, Oklahoma's a really good Western that, I mean, you don't usually think of it as a Western because it's a musical, but there are farms around the town. There are people ranching. Like, there actually is an economy that the town is, like, part of.
Somebody sometimes offhandedly mentions gold.
Yeah,
I'm
but
there's other stuff that comes with a mine.
Yeah, like Treasure Sierra Madre has gold, and there's an actual town, and there's like a construction stuff, and you know, to find the gold, they travel like for weeks into the wilderness. And then you got other stuff like what was it? Who Shot Liberty Valance? Like that one has nothing in the town, and it's a really good one, but like the town makes no sense. Ugh.
For me, it was. I think it was one of the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Mhm.
I know that's like part of a trilogy or something. None of
Yeah.
those towns ever looked like they had any reason to be town.
hmm Um, well, I think part of it for that specific setting for those is that they're taking place during the Civil War, where there's a lot of like, military devastation for the area around them.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's part of it. Uh,
Okay.
and yes, they're technically a trilogy, but there's no connection between the different films.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's
it's
been a
just
while.
yeah. I think Clint Eastwood is in all of them, and Van Cleef also shows up in I think two of them.
Okay. My favorite Western was always Firefly. I always liked
It's
that.
good. It's also, yes, definitely a Western. No, don't let the spaceship fool you. That's just their horses.
Yep, that's just it. It's even shaped like a horse. Now that it's been said out loud, you're like, that is a
uh,
design for a ship with a neck.
I'm well, they talk about that the ship is like stupidly made, right? That is one of the things that is mentioned. I forget if that's in the show or the movie, but
Ship like this will be with you to the day you die. That's because it's a death trap, sir.
right, right. But it looks nice.
It does. God, one of the dumbest movies, and this is completely nothing to do with wherever we were.
Uh-huh.
There's a scene in Firefly where they are searching for River and her brother, and they're hiding outside on the ship in spacesuit. It cuts to a scene of them searching for them inside the ship, and you see one of the people turning over the placemat. I'm always like, that dude didn't want to be here today. He's not even trying to find these people. What is he going to find them under a placemat?
His boss said, "Leave nothing unturned."
Just coming in, not my job. Turn it over. Okay.
Yeah.